You finally get some space. You're ready for the next chapter. Maybe you're going to use it to start some sort of creative outlet, maybe an entrepreneurial venture, or maybe just start the next chapter, whatever that might be for you. And you experience imposter syndrome, maybe for the first time. There's this question of who am I and who am I kidding? We're going to explore that today through the lens of Fire the Haters. Jillian Johnsrud is on the show with us today, author of the brand new book, Fire the Haters. And we're going to take a look at imposter syndrome, confidence and clarity, procrastination via preparation, really doing what we try to do every week, encouraging you to take action. Welcome to the Ultimate Crowdsourced Personal Finance Show. This is Choose FI. All right, guys, very excited to get into this week's episode. We're going to talk about Fire the Haters. We're going to take a look at really just how do we force ourselves to take action. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. Yeah, this should be great. Obviously, it's always wonderful to have Jillian on the podcast, and her book is fantastic. But I think people would hear Fire the Haters and then the subtitle, which is Finding Courage to Create Online in a Critical World, and think that, oh, this is only limited to those content creators, those others, right? Like they have a blog or they have a podcast. But to me, reading through this book in such detail, it transcends that. This is about anybody who's doing something different, who's having the courage to step out and do something unconventional, which, frankly, Jonathan, that speaks to all of us in the FI community, right? We're doing something different, we're doing something unconventional. And we might get some pushback in our regular lives, right? From our family and friends about that. I think that's what's so beautiful about Jillian's book. And I don't want to go through every aspect of it here, but setting boundaries in relationships, being clear in your communication, right? Why not you? Like you said, that imposter syndrome. Like there are all of these amazing nuggets in this book. So yeah, I think it absolutely transcends just creating content and really is applicable to all of us. So Jillian, with that, welcome back for the many-th time to choose a FI.
Many is that in the Dewey Decimal System? Like,
I just coined it. I didn't have the exact number.
Thank you, guys. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I think probably the context for this, obviously, like you have a huge audience inside the financial independent space, and because you do offer coaching services, many people have taken you up on that and have asked you to help them with this process of transition as they're going from what may have been their corporate career to this uncharted next chapter. They have an idea, but there's a lot of fear. There's maybe to some degree there's looking for permission or someone to validate that this might actually work, but there's all sorts of other baggage that comes with that. And as a result of thousands and thousands of hours of these conversations, I think you've had some epiphanies, and you've probably had some crystallization, things that you thought or that you believed or you'd seen work in your own life, but you've now seen work for many, many people. And as I was reading part of your book, there was this one piece that really stood out to me, and I think it's probably a place to start for us. And it's that person that they tell you what it is that you want to do, and you ask them, well, have you started doing it yet in any capacity? And it's almost like, no, well, I'm preparing to prepare. I'm prepared.
Yeah.
Let's make a plan to make a plan to make a plan. And they haven't done anything. They haven't done it at all. And so it's like we keep coming up with excuses to avoid actually interacting with this dream that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about it. I think I nicknamed that one procrastination via preparation because it's so easy. Like preparation feels like the most responsible, like the most logical, decent thing to do is just to prepare and prepare and prepare. But at some point, it really is just a form of procrastination. It's a way of avoiding the vulnerable, scary work of actually doing the thing and having other people know that you're doing the thing. Yeah, it's safer. It's more guarded to just keep preparing behind the scenes without taking any real action.
And part of it is And this is kind of where I was leading with this, is this preparation piece. I think is because some of us identify in ourselves some varying degree of imposter syndrome, and we don't know how to circumnavigate that. We don't know how to get over that because it's a crippling fear. It's an identity crisis. We know what our identity was. We were given permission from a system to be XYZ, and we did that probably very, very well. Very, very well. But no one's given us permission to do this next thing, whatever this next thing is. And so we bump up against imposter syndrome.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is one of those funny things that if if you're trying and if you're growing and if you're kind of showing up as a professional, as this new version of this person you're trying to be, you're going to experience it. And I find, people say, well, how do I overcome it? And I don't know if you overcome it. I think we need to think about it differently. I kind of think about it like going to the gym. If you've never exercised before in your life, if you know nothing about this, and you go to the gym and you start sweating and you freak out, you're like, there's like moisture coming out of my skin. This is horrible. This is bad. This is a sign I shouldn't be here. Like something has gone horribly wrong. This means I should leave and never come back. Well, no. Like if you're sweating, you're probably doing what you need to do to get where you need to go. And imposter syndrome is the same thing. If you're experiencing it, it means that you're doing something right. You're trying to play outside your comfort zone. You're trying to stretch yourself. You're growing. And it's not something that we should aim to never feel, but just to know we're going to have a little bit of that discomfort. Just like sweating at the gym, you're going to have a little bit of that discomfort, but it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, that's so critical that people know, like you're saying, you go to the gym, you're going to sweat. You do anything new and difficult and outside of your comfort zone, you're going to feel imposter syndrome. It's just it's part of the deal, right? And like I would actually question the person who doesn't feel imposter syndrome, frankly, right? Because
Yes.
like, man, what's up with your ego that, I'm jokingly saying that, but realistically, most successful people that I know, people that you would look at and say, wow, that person has it all together. I've had conversations with multiple people that again, people would think are have it all together on this podcast, and they experience crippling imposter syndrome, right? Or did, at least, until, like you're saying, Jillian, you you find a way to move forward and understand, okay, this is just part of how our brains work, first off. But for me, I know I've come to the conclusion it's I'm not holding myself up to be a financial expert. So I don't need to have PhDs and fancy letters behind my name. It's I'm talking to people and I'm providing support and some impetus to get people to take action. So that was kind of how I reframed it in my own head. I don't know honestly if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you were my coach, what you would say to that, if that's like a workaround around imposter syndrome, or if I came up with some like a bad way around this. But anyway, Jillian, I think it really is important that people out there listening know this really afflicts just about everybody.
Yeah, and your workaround, I actually have a whole chapter about that. It's the myth of the most experty expert. Because sometimes we get it in our head that, like, who are we to show up when there's someone better than us? Obviously better than us. They're more educated, they're more qualified, they're more talented, they have more experience. Like, is there place for us? Like, how do we why do we even deserve to be here when there's someone who by every measure is better than us? But the reality is that you don't just need one person in any given field. You don't just need one person talking about finances. There's room for lots of people, lots of voices, lots of perspectives, lots of stories. And even if you're providing a service, like if you're a freelance designer, there's probably one freelance designer who is the best in the world, and there's still space for you. Your price, your availability, your perspective, your style can still be the very best option for someone. even if there's someone that you would look at and say, well, they're obviously better than me. And this affects us across the board because there's so much, whether you're volunteering or even if you, I know a lot of people in the five space want to travel, and it's easy to look at people online and be like, wow, they're a lot better than me at this. Like they understand it. Their kids behave better. Like I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm cut out. But the reality is it doesn't matter if you're the most experty expert. Like you can still add value. You can still be helpful. You can still show up right where you're at.
What you mentioned there, you could look at it through the lens of just, a lack of confidence. I think one way to look at imposter syndrome is just thinking about confidence and the questions, the script, the internal script that runs through our mind. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't like it? What if no one else approves of the choice that I've made? What if I try something and it doesn't work? What if I create a product and there's no market for it? These are the real questions that make up imposter syndrome. And a lot of them feel like they have to do with confidence. We're just not confident that we can pull this off.
Yeah, the trouble with confidence is sometimes there again the script on what that should be that you should have perfect confidence and perfect clarity before you start. Before you make this transition into FI, before you change your life, before you leave your job, before you try volunteering, you should have perfect confidence and perfect clarity. And the reality is that's not possible. Confidence and clarity come in doing the thing. I played basketball growing up, and even from a young age, like I idolized the women's basketball team in my town. Like it was a big deal. It was like the ultimate for me. But there's no way I could sit on my couch having never touched a basketball and have perfect confidence and perfect clarity that I'm going to be awesome at this. Like that's delusional. That's not confidence. Like you figure it out by doing it, by practicing, by playing, by doing the thing you want to do. Can your family travel around the globe for a year? You're not going to have perfect confidence and you're not going to have perfect clarity until you're in it. And you get better as you go along. Like there's a learning curve to everything. So you just have to get started, and you have to start with the understanding like I'm not going to have perfect confidence about this. Like if 100% confident has to be how I feel in order to take my first step, you're never going to take the first step.
Yeah, and this is the intersection of imposter syndrome and procrastination, which we started with, right? Which is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? And why not you? You wrote that in your book. Why not you? If you are waiting, and this is in any aspect of life, right? Like if you're waiting for that perfection to get started, it's never going to happen, right? It is impossible. Like you're saying, you have to learn while you're doing. And like Jonathan, you and I, like we could have said, like the why not you? There was nothing inherent about us that would say we're going to become popular podcasters in financial independence when we met. But we got started and we figured it out. And we did, our early episodes were objectively not that great, right? But we figured it out. We iterated and we kept moving
I
forward,
don't
right?
accept that, but that's fine. It's good to know how you feel.
There were a couple. There were a couple in there that we needed to get better on, right? But the cool thing is we weren't holding ourselves up to perfection, right? That that's a marvelously liberating way of looking at it. Is if you're waiting for perfection, I mean, it's never going to happen. But if you just say, "Hey, let's get started. Let's iterate. Let's test." Right, Jillian? Like you can iterate and test in anything you're doing in life, and you just got to start.
So this confidence and clarity in doing, to pull that into Brad, your comment about procrastination and just starting, Jillian, you had this example that you were talking about, and I've literally had the exact same conversation where you're talking with, in this case, several individuals, and they're considering moving into, financial coaching in some capacity, and the conversation is with you. should I go get my CFP, my certified financial planner designation, first before I get started? And this is like the prototypical conversation of preparation, allowing us to procrastinate, actually doing what it is that we want us to do.
Yeah, it's it's funny. It's such a common thing to want to just be more prepared and to be more prepared. And I always ask people, have you started coaching? Like, have you helped friends? Have you done it for free? Like, because confidence and clarity come in doing. How do you even know that you like it? How do you even know that you'll enjoy this if you haven't tried it? Why go and do another year, 2 years, 3 years of education for something that you're scared to even test? But it's so tempting, and I kind of use a couple questions to say, is this procrastination or is this like valid preparation? One is like, have you come up against the situation where your knowledge and your skill set isn't enough to meet the situation? Have you bumped up against that where you're like, I'm not prepared, I don't know enough? In this case, in coaching clients, have you had a situation where you're like, wow, I'm really out of my depth and you couldn't figure it out? And you realize the only way I can figure this out is if I have these classes. Or two, have other people consistently asked you for this thing? Like, are people asking, do you have this certification? Like that specific certification, I do not have. And out of 100 clients, no one's ever asked. No one's ever requested it. I don't know if my clients even know what it is to even like ask the question, do I have this specific thing? And so if you haven't found yourself out of your depth where you really need this form of preparation, and if no one's ever requested it from you, you might be procrastinating.
So I think as we're, building this conversation out, we're trying to give individuals tools just to realize you can do this. You can take this first step. But I think even now, if someone is willing to get started, our mindset to some degree is based on win lose, failure, success. It's all about the outcome. We define whether something was a good choice, a good decision for us based on whether or not the outcome was a positive one. And Jillian, is this in its own way setting us up for some form of failure?
Well, I talk about this in the book too. Like, there's a lot of different metrics that happen in each experience, in each situation. And the trouble is that we're kind of programmed to only really care about one metric. And this will be reinforced with everyone around you. If you say, I'm going on a diet, and someone asks you, how's it going? They're really only asking about one metric. They're asking, did you lose weight? They're not asking, have you learned to eat more vegetables? They're not asking, are you drinking more water? They're not asking, have you found an activity that you enjoy doing most days? They're not asking, have you figured out like meal prep and shopping? All of those metrics actually matter more to your long term success. But that's not the metric they're asking about, because you can just lose weight by like drinking water and maple syrup or something for a few weeks and like it'll happen and you not be long term successful. So I think it's important to focus on metrics that are going to move you along and make you successful in the long term. And the one metric, that you might think of the first time, like in a business, how's business going? They're really only asking if you've earned money. It's really the only metric, but it's not necessarily the best metric or the only metric to measure.
So if we're shifting from, this idea of outcome to one process, in my mind, another way to think about this is like, what are the systems that we're building? What are the triggers that we're avoiding? And if we're going to really tie this to diet in this case, what are the triggers that we're avoiding? What are the habits that we're building or the I guess you could say it when, when you go off the rails in some way and you identify those patterns, those self-sabotage patterns, what are the coping mechanisms that we're figuring out to minimize or eliminate this? What are the process that we're building in our light to lead us to a higher probability of nailing that outcome? That has been, since you talk about, health and fitness, that has been huge just generally for me. And it is a lifelong, again, a lifelong process, lifelong marathon. But I think about things like, have I cut out sugar? You just generally, high processed sugar. Like that's something you can do. Have I cut out sodas? Have I cut out excessive caffeinated, artificially sweetened Monster energy drinks, which I have, by the way.
Wow.
And like, I had to rip that Band-Aid off. Man, let me tell you.
You
Uh,
love those things.
I
Come on.
know, I know. Like what are these things that that they're crutches that are actually holding you back in many, many ways? You know, are you increasing your fruit and vegetable outtake? How many days a week do you go out for fast food or pizza, et cetera? These are the types of things that you focus on the process. Brad, I see you leaning in here a little bit here. I'd love to get your take, like in terms of systems and process. Is that the way that you think now? Because
Yeah.
historically, I would have said you were a, cutthroat win lose is the metric, and I feel like, we could identify that mindset has shifted for you as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely has. I mean, I would describe myself growing up as that kind of type A result type person. But luckily, certainly in the last 10 years, probably 15 at this point, it's really shifted. And I think, like Jillian, the thing you said in there that's so critical is the long term thinking, right? And that's whether we're talking about health or business, right? Going back to business, sure, when you ask somebody or when somebody asks you, hey, how's it going? They just want to know basically what are your sales, like what's your income and how many employees do you have, right? Like those are the two like metrics for, oh, is it a successful business? But Jillian, my question to you is because I know I personally went through this, right? Like I had a lot of quote unquote failures in my initial entrepreneurial journey, but in my own head, I don't think of those as failures because I learned every single step of the way. And for my long term success, they set me up wonderfully to be where I am today. But if somebody asked me at the moment, like, hey, what's going on with firewoodrack.net or soccertools.com? Like, well, they're failing miserably, right? But 15 years later, I can still do rudimentary HTML and I know affiliate marketing and I know, all these things. Like, how do people rethink? Like, you talk about those long-term metrics. Like, how does someone focus on long-term metrics that they might not be able to quantify necessarily?
When I started kind of my creative entrepreneurial journey, and even with my clients transitioning into FI, I kind of focus on these two metrics as well. The two metrics I picked when I started was I want to grow personally, professionally. I want to learn. I want to be growing as a person. And I want to focus on relationships. Because I think the thought process is that you have all of these experiences. Some we label as a win, some we label as a failure. But whatever is the thing that we end up on that kind of works, it's generally built on the foundation of all of the growth and all of the relationships that we've built up into that point. Those become essential. And if you hadn't developed that growth, if you hadn't developed those relationships, the thing that eventually works might not have worked without it. And this is so true in like creative entrepreneurial journeys, but even in the FI space, it's hard. How do we define success? And when people are making that transition, I look at like, are you growing? Are you personally, intellectually, emotionally? Are you growing? And is the quality of your relationships improving? Because if you have those two things, yeah, a trip might go horrible. Yeah, you might the budget might be kind of all over the place that first year. Like all the other stuff you figure out. But when it works, those are the two things that typically work. And even on that personal growth, transitioning into, I left the 9 to 5 6 years ago. So it's been a while now. me and my husband have grown so much as people since we left the 9 to 5. But if we hadn't, I don't know where our marriage would be. Like, I don't know where our family would be. All the things that we do now are built on that growth that we were so intentional about. And I think a lot of people, especially in early retirement, but even traditional retirement, like the picture is so clear, partly because, my husband was in the military. So I know a lot of people who left their careers at 40, 45, because they put in their 20 years and they were done. And the picture is the wife at home calling her friend, being like, he's home all the time. He never leaves. And now, like, he doesn't know how to load the dishwasher. Like, what, I'm supposed to make him 3 meals a day now? Like, why doesn't he have any friends? Like, get a hobby. I had my own life and now he's here just wrecking it. And that's, you need that growth and you need to figure those things out. And so I think focusing on the metrics that make sense for you and not just the one that society says this is the most important metric.
There is this balancing act between preparation and doing. And the problem when you are in the procrastination phase is that you're like, I'm just gonna keep preparing. Everything that I'm going to do is just preparing. But I'd love for you to talk about a continuum to get someone off, why it's important for them to get off that ledge, but then also where that line is where it can go too far.
Well, I think it's in the testing and scaling. It's like, what's one small, I consider a test something you can do within 1 to 4 hours. What's one little step that you can do in 1 to 4 hours that would kind of move the ball down the field? And then you evaluate that. What did you learn? What did you figure out? What worked? What didn't work? Relationships and growth. Did that happen? And then you put forward your next little test. Where it goes too far is when people get into this go big or go home thinking. Like, they need this one dramatic grand gesture. They need to go all in and make it be big and huge and like the one time, like this is their one shot. When you get into that thinking, it doesn't allow the learning, that growth and relationships that happen if you're slowly testing and scaling. Instead of doing 30 tests to get to the same point, they try to do one. So you don't have the advantage of all of that feedback, of all of that learning, of all those relationships that honestly make the thing work eventually, all those iterations. And when people get into this go big or go home thinking there's this one big grand gesture and it doesn't work because it never works that way, and they get burned and they have to like lick their wounds for a year, 2 years, and they try again and it doesn't work and they get burned again. And at some point, you get bitter and you think, this is for suckers. Like, everyone's lying to me. This doesn't work. And they take their ball and go home, thinking that either it's not for them or it's just a joke. Like, this never could work. And that might be, that could be investing, that could be real estate, that could be an entrepreneurial journey, that could be a creative thing. Like, it applies to so many things in life.
I think this conversation is important because I know there's people in the audience that I don't know what it is for them, but they have something that they have been procrastinating on. They have something that they have been preparing for, but it's 100% preparation. They haven't even dipped. There's no risk at this point. And in their own mind, the idea of taking even a small amount of risk is the most insanely risky thing in the world. So, like, I'm just going to stay over here and I'm going to keep watching more tutorials or whatever that is. All right. So now, whether it's they're going to take the next chapter and they're going to leave their corporate career, they're going to test, maybe this creative outlet they've been working on and actually set themselves up to get in public feedback, or maybe, there's some action that this individual that I'm thinking of is leaning on that for the first time, they're going to be exposed to public opinion. And even if not public opinion right away, private opinion, they're going to be subject to the judgment or validation of friends and family. You're not going to be able to take the next step without friends and family finding out. And that is scary for some people. It's scary for some people to announce that they are, going to take advantage of the fact that they are right at the edge of financial independence and walk away. It's hard for people to say, I'm going to walk away from a very profitable job and try my hand at something that has no revenue stream. It's difficult for people that say, I'm going to, like, all right, I planted some seeds. This is a real thing. These are real conversations that you've had with a lot of people. What are the guardrails? What is the framework if you recognize that as soon as friends and family get wind of this, it's going to be bad?
Or you think it's going to be bad, right?
It might be bad. Um, this is so common. Honestly, everyone that I coach, there's at least one person in their life they're nervous about telling about this transition. Or even, I had a client who was really worried about what her grandfather would think. Would he be proud of her? And he had passed away years ago. But we have this desire to want that approval, to want that support from friends and family. So there's a couple things that I try to keep in mind. One, this vision for your life, for your family, for house renovation, for a creative project, for a business, for a volunteer, nonprofit thing. This vision was given to you. It wasn't given to every single person, which is a good thing, especially if it's like an entrepreneurial thing, because you'd have a ton of competition. But this vision was given to you. So if other people don't recognize it, like I can't really be mad at them because they were given their own vision for their life, for their family. And maybe I don't see it. And so I think about, oh man, when we bought our first house, we paid cash for it because it was the ugliest, crappiest house that we saw.
That's an impressive litmus test.
I know.
Is that like a filter on Zillow?
Yeah.
I'm looking for the ugliest. That looks like it's had some, you know.
One time I was on the phone with my mom and I was showing him a house that we were about to buy. And I heard my dad in the background go, "Does she try to find the ugliest house?"
Yes.
Yes, we do. And I was walking through with, we only saw it for like an hour. We probably did everything wrong. We didn't do an inspection. We just walked through for an hour and we said, "We will give you cash for this. Please give us a title." And that's what happened. So after we closed, I was walking my family through and my grandma went, "Oh, sweetie, you're not going to make my grandson live here, are you?" And I was like, yeah, we are. But I had a vision for this house. I had a vision for the renovation. I had a vision of like an amazing family home it could be. And it's okay if other people don't have that same vision. Like that can't be the expectation. That this unique vision that was given to me, every single person in my life also has to have that unique vision. Can't be the standard that we're hoping for.
Let me push back on that just for balance. So someone like, where is the line? Because I think this is what we're talking about. It's a question of boundaries. Because a lot of times when you have an idea, you're looking for validation, you're looking for feedback. Is this a good idea? And sometimes you're going with like best efforts to friends and family, asking them for feedback. And maybe their feedback is good, but it's not what you're looking for. And as a counterbalance, maybe their feedback is clearly toxic. This is why boundaries are really important, because I think a lot of people, probably rightly so, are going to go ask for feedback from friends and family. Of why, this is what do you think? I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? This is what's setting it up. So when grandma says, "Really, are you going to have my grandson live here?" Like, she's not necessarily wrong to say that. So like if we recognize like that might be true, that we might get good feedback that is not what we want to hear, and we might get bad feedback that we definitely don't need. How do we parse that and make the decision, like what to vet, what to use to, mold our idea, and what to ignore because they're crossing a boundary that isn't theirs to cross?
Mhm. Yeah, this is so complicated. It can feel complicated, but in the book I mentioned that everyone who's really successful in a given thing knows other people who are successful the exact same way. So, like, bodybuilders know bodybuilders, writers know writers, cooks know cooks. You'll never see someone who does like fashion design and they're like, in 20 years, I've never met anyone else who does fashion design. That's so strange. Or a guitar player who's like, yeah, I've never met another guitar player. Like, I've just played on my own for the last 30 years. And so when you need feedback, when you need support, you need to go to the people who do that thing, who are successful in that thing. That was not my grandma. Now, if I would have walked through the house with some real estate investors and some contractors, and they were like, oh, sweetie, this is not the house to buy. You were making a horrible choice. That's really good feedback to take. And it's the same with FI. I think you mentioned like wanting validation or feedback. Some of the coaching I do, people have a good plan. They're making this transition, but they don't know other people. No one in their friends and family circle knows math. They don't have like this vision. And they want someone else who like knows to look at this and be like, did I look at this correctly? Like, am I seeing this correctly? I think it's right. But they want another person to look through the whole plan. And so if you need feedback, like get it from the people who are successful in that. Don't expect, this is another important part. Not everyone in your life has to be everything to you, and giving them permission to not be that thing. Your parent who maybe did a blue collar 9 to 5 job their entire life might not be the person who's going to be super supportive of like your creative entrepreneurial vision. And that's okay. Not every single person has to understand. Not every single person has to be supportive. And there's people in my life who don't get what I do online. It doesn't make sense. Like my sweet mom, I tease her about this. She only kind of thinks it's funny. But when I started a blog, like it was like 2 years into it, and she finally said, "So, this blog, like where do you put it?" And I was like, "What do you mean, where do I put it?" "Well, like, where is it at?" I'm like, "Mom, it's on the internet."
I don't know if I could actually answer that. Like, it's in a computer. It's inside the computer.
It's on the internet. She was like, "Well, how should I know that?" Like, she shouldn't be the person that I'm looking for like support and encouragement on, I don't know, email marketing. Not everybody has to be everything in your life.
This is a really like big point that I think I appreciate you diving into a little more, because it's not that we're just looking for a yes. Like we're looking for yes people, someone that will just blanket say yes to everything that we want to do. Because not all of our ideas are equally good. Because I think that's a really big thing for entrepreneurs to understand and create. Like success is built on usually a pile of failure, a monster pile of small failures, hopefully, right? But a big pile of them. You iterate your idea until you get something good. So it's not that we want people to carte blanche say yes to everything that we want, but we want to recognize when someone has a body of knowledge. Are they saying yes or no as a visceral reaction? Or is it based on some level of experience that we can speed up, and we can speed up our failures to get us to success a little bit faster? And in your case, you're saying, you know, your grandmother didn't have all of that insight. Now, I don't know what, a Paula Pant would have said, but maybe that's not even the right person. If you had gone to a fixer-upper real estate investor, what would that person have had the same eyes that you had? And this actually gets us to a point that we heard James Clear talking about in Atomic Habits. It's actually the power of community and surrounding yourself with a community where the behavior or the outcome that you want is the desired behavior by the group, right? And now that's how you're going to fast track, the knowledge base that you have and get, they're probably still going to tell you it's a bad idea in some cases, but it won't just be a bad idea. It'll be like, hey, don't dig here, move over just a couple feet over here, and this would be a much, better choice. Brad?
Yeah, and it's so easy to get stopped by those negative comments that are going to come in no matter what, right? But you have an entire section of your book talking about optimizing for not quitting. right? And figuring out the worst case scenario. And I'd love to hear you talk about this because I think this is so critical, right? It's that, as you have a quote in there from Brian Harris, there's one thing you need to optimize for when you're starting a project, not quitting. And how would somebody think through that?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize what are the things that will cause me to quit? Like, what are the things that will knock me off my feet and I won't recover from? And tying it back to family and friends, I blogged anonymously for 2 years, even from my family and friends, because I knew on the internet you can have really bad days. And I knew that if on that bad day I had family that was really critical or piled on to that bad day, it might break me. Like that might be something I don't come back from. And so you can create kind of a wide circle around the things that might make you quit. With family and friends, a mistake I see people make often is wanting people to support them in a specific way. And therefore, they're trying to like sell this idea and sell the vision to their friends and family who are not buying. And you see this all the time. The Choose Facebook Facebook group. How can I convince my friends and family? How can I like get them to understand? And I have a very simple rule. I will answer any question asked as honestly as I can. But oftentimes, our friends and family aren't asking questions. We're piling on explanations, and there was never a question. They were never seeking more information. They were never inquiring. We're just trying to pile on and defend and sell this idea to people who like didn't ask you a question. So if no one asks me a question about my FI journey, I'm not going to try to sell it to them because they're not interested. And so I think, understanding if you're going to make this transition into FI, if you're going to start a project, what are those things that might derail you? And how can you just create a wide circle around them? How can you just avoid that altogether? Because there'll be enough, like Jonathan said, there'll be enough pile of small failures that you have to sort through. Know what the things that'll knock you out of the game. And like don't play that game. If it's I have to make $40,000 the first year or I quit, well, you're setting yourself up for win-lose. Don't play that game. Figure out how to optimize for not quitting.
Yeah, and I love your concept of setting up these rules. And I think that's people can do that in all aspects of their life. And since obviously we're talking here about optimizing for not quitting with online creations, but it really is everything. Like you're going to get 1 or 2% of every bit of feedback that you get is going to be terrible, like make you want to cry, right? Like you said, you have a bad day on the internet, right? Like if you go and read your reviews, even if 98% of them are amazing, you changed my life, the 1 or 2% of, oh wow, these people are terrible, for X, Y, and Z reason, those are the one you focus on, right? Like that's what your brain does. And I mean, clearly, you're talking about firing the haters here, right? Like setting up a rule just very simply, if you know that's going to break you, a very simple option is to just not look at the comments or the reviews or the feedback. So Jillian, like one rule that you have that I think is brilliant, that actually it's funny because the example you use in the book is about me specifically, which I is awesome. Because we talked about this on the Everyday Courage podcast as well, is clear is kind, right? And this is a rule that transcends online business, right? This is
Yeah.
this is a life skill. So talk us through clear is kind.
Yeah, oftentimes we in an attempt to be nice or to people please, we aren't necessarily clear about our rules. And sometimes we don't know our rules for ourselves, and so we get kind of pushed all over the place. But if you know what your rule is, or just not even what your rule is, like what do you want? What do you need? In the chapter before I talk about setting up rules that keep you working and productive and happy, but in any part of your personal life, I adopt this motto of clear is kind. Because oftentimes we're not very clear about what we want, about what we need, about our limitations, about what we can and can't do. And instead, we just kind of hope for the best. Like we hope other people are mind readers.
They'll
We
figure
hope
out
they
your
have the
rules. Surely.
yeah, we hope they have the exact same sensibilities as we do. And therefore, we never have to do the work of being clear. We never have to have that vulnerable, honest, difficult conversation about maybe what works for us and what doesn't work for us. But in the end, it can just lead to resentment or burnout and this happens in your 9 to 5 job, this happens in your relationships with friends, with family, wherever. It can lead to kind of bitterness because why doesn't everyone else know what I need? Why don't they realize what they're asking is too much? So we don't have to say, no, it doesn't work for me today or this week.
As clear as kind, it feels like it's in many cases it's the art of no. Where it's so easy to say yes because we say yes hoping everybody's going to respect, our all of our unsaid rules. But then we end up in a state where we have the emotions that you just, said out loud, like resentment and burnout, etc. No often is us exercising our rules, but there's an art to no.
It's sometimes it's no. The trickier thing is that oftentimes, even when we say yes, it's conditional, but we don't want to be clear about those conditions. So, like, I'm on this podcast, and if I had like a hard time I needed to leave, it's one thing to hope that we end on time.
I'm checking the clock now. I think we did it. I think we're doing a good job. Yep, we're all set.
But then if it runs over, I could be stressed and resentful. If I have a hard out, clear as kind is saying, I'm so happy to be here. I have to be done by this time. And being clear about that instead of taking on that frustration and that disappointment for ourselves. And that's what I talk about in the book. Life is full of frustration and disappointment. It's okay if other people experience it. Like, we can't absorb all of the frustration and the disappointment for the entire world so that no one else has to feel their feelings. We have to create those boundaries, create those rules, and then be super clear about it. And sometimes you have to be clear over and over and over.
To our audience, if you want to find out the whole story, behind conditional yeses, go check out Jillian's book, Fire the Haters. Jillian, let me just give us back to you just for a second. I want people to appreciate why this book exists because I remember right now you're living out a great life. And if you go back almost to your teenage years or your early, 20s, you started out with a purple binder and a business plan, and then 1 year of just being resentful that your idea never made it off the business plan. You were so prepared and you had done nothing. And now I feel, and maybe you can correct me, I'd love for you to set the record straight. This book exists kind of as I have done it. It had nothing to do with the business plan, but I've kind of stumbled my way to this end result. Here's what I learned along the way. Now, is that accurate? And, maybe you could clarify for the audience, who is this book for? Who will get value from this book, Fire the Haters?
Yeah, this book is accumulation of every incorrect mindset that I had, every mistake I made that I had to learn through the hard way of, well, this isn't working. Everything that I kind of reframe, I I did the wrong thing first. Like I totally procrastinated via preparation. I totally tried to go pig versus test and scale. I totally tried to sell friends and family on what I was doing when they were not buying. I've done kind of every mistake and it's accumulation of that and like you said it's hundreds of coaching calls with people of why do people get stuck? How do they eventually make progress? And that's something that has forever fascinated me. Sometimes when you have an experience in your childhood you kind of recreate or want to like close that loop. Growing up, there were people in my life who seemed very stuck in situations and who couldn't, for a multitude of reasons, seem to make progress. And now I'm constantly closing that loop in my professional life of helping people who feel stuck make progress. And it's just because of that, maybe because of that like non-resolved emotional baggage, it is incredibly satisfying to see that loop close. But this book is for everyone who wants to do something different, especially if you're a creative, if you're an entrepreneur, if you want to start a nonprofit, like if you want to do something, but you might feel a little stuck and you're worried about sharing all this stuff online. You're worried that maybe what if like your taste doesn't match your skill? What if you're not the most experty expert? Like what if you have imposter syndrome? How do we think about these differently? How do we create rules? How do we navigate this life where we're going to live outside our comfort zone for a larger percentage of time and still stay healthy and safe and productive?
All right. Well, for the non-experty experts out there, where can they get a copy of this book, Jillian?
If you go to my site, jillianjohnsrud.com/book, I've got all the pre-order links, but it's everywhere. Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Target. It launches October 12th, but it's available for pre-order before then.
All right, Jillian, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It's so great to hang out with you guys.
All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.